Okay, I assume, yeah. So yeah, as I said, Seán, if you want to kick off first, and then Jane, if you want to add something or like, give your kind of take on the question, feel free to do so. Perfect. So Seán, just in terms of the kind of, research and how you approach it, how do you decide which research methods to use at like the start of the projects? And are there kind of any factors that influence your choice, or like how are you making your decision?
Yeah, so I think it's very important and incredible and a major best practice when it comes to user research and choosing your methodology to make sure that you have aligned and decided fully on the objectives and the research questions that you're going to focus on throughout that initiative. They are vital to understand them when it comes to the choosing of the methodology. It helps you understand kind of the depth of the answers, the depth of the feedback you might need to be gathering as part of the methodology that you choose, and also kind of helps you get an understanding of maybe the timeline that was required to help you to understand and answer the objectives. Obviously, the other main thing is the stage of the design process that you're in. So if you're on a discovery phase, maybe you're more interested in learning about the needs and the pain points and the motivations of your users. And that might lead you towards one methodology that's quite heavy on qualitative data. Or you might be quite late in on the design process. You could be, iterating your prototypes, or you could be quite late into the stage of implementation. And really you're looking to kind of validate the work that you've done over the past few weeks and months into your process. That might require a different methodology, leaning more heavily into quantitative data, success metrics, time on task, aspects like that. Other things that might influence your methodology, if you're dealing with stakeholders or clients, there might be an expected deliverable, or that is expected at the end of your design process or at the end of your research process. Things like personas or journey maps might influence the methodology that you have to choose to help you deliver on those expectations with those stakeholders. And then, if you're working within software companies, things like timelines can be quite tight to help you decide on those methodologies, budget, even the target persona. So if your project or your initiative is focusing on a certain persona, how you recruit those participants may also influence the methodology as well.
Very good. And may I ask just a follow-up question there, Seán? You mentioned at the beginning, like you need to kind of have your objectives, your timelines, and there was actually a third thing that you said. But do you have like an example for the guys, like what is the best way to kind of frame their objectives? Or is there like, any best practices on that? How specific they need to be with that?
So how specific with the objectives? Yeah, that's a difficult question. Like in a lot of times when you're working within UX design within a company, there would be a lot of collaboration involved on those objectives. So the objectives would be decided as a group within your product designer, your product researcher, your product manager, and they'll help you kind of identify where the potential opportunities are for your focusing on those initiatives. And your objectives obviously could also come from past research or past testing, or metrics that you're gathering within your business or your product. So if you see, for example, there's a dip in a certain level of engagement somewhere, that could be leading to an objective for you in your research. So it's a bit of a difficult question. I think it's important when you do decide your objectives, though, is to stick with them, because you won't be able to answer whether they are the correct objective until you really focus in and fully complete the research process on that point.
Very good. Thank you so much, Seán. Yeah, it was a difficult question, but yeah, I think I managed to cover it really well. Thank you so much. Jane, would you like to add something to this one? We can proceed to the next one.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. In terms of, you also mentioned qualitative and quantitative methods. Like, do you have an example when to use one over the other, and when one works better than the other?
Yeah, so I think when you're in your kind of discovery phase of your design process and you're really trying to understand or identify potential problems that you're looking to solve within your product or your project, qualitative is the key to creating empathy. Numbers and data and metrics, they are valuable insights into the usage of your product and the usage of your tools, but it's really difficult to understand the why behind them. You could look at these metrics or look at your data and, like I said before, kind of see a dip in your engagement, but it tells you really nothing about why that is. So you really need to dig in and gather a lot of qualitative insights from your participants, from your users, to help you really create that empathy in discovery phase. Quantitative methods, quantitative data, is really good usage to help you validate sometimes those qualitative insights. So once you've gathered them, you can maybe do things like surveys to help you kind of get it from a broader audience and help you kind of a broader understanding of how those qualitative insights really align with the wider population in that sense. And then obviously quantitative methods are vital when it comes to usability testing and testing out your prototypes, your initiatives. So gathering, like I said, success metrics, time on tasks, aspects like that, satisfaction scores, experience scores, things like that. But yeah, I'll just add, like, it is, I think probably the most important aspect probably nowadays is that you probably need a good balance of both, ideally. And even when creating empathy in the discovery phase with your qualitative data, having bits of quantitative metrics to help support those insights really is quite valuable across, a lot of UX design projects nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And just a sub question on that one. So let's say, for example, that on a quantitative side, we have survey, and then on qual side, we have user interview and discovery phase. Like, which one would you go with first?
That is, it's an interesting question. So I think it depends on the level of knowledge that you have. So if you're starting off from kind of step zero, starting off with a survey as a kickoff method is actually quite a valuable way to do things. It allows you to gather a broad amount of data very fast and give you kind of quite a broad understanding of who your users are and maybe where their levels of satisfaction are. Helps you kind of gather, some vital pieces to help you kind of get that understanding. I think the limitation of the surveys is that it doesn't go too deep into your knowledge gathering or deep into those insights. So follow-up qualitative methods like user interviews and usability testing kind of helps you get broader insights. So the surveys really like I said, gives you broad understanding of your users, maybe helps you understand where those gaps in knowledge are, where you might need to dig deeper, and they can help you form the research questions and the questions you bring into your qualitative methods. On the other hand, if you kind of have a general understanding and are really eager to dig really quickly and start speaking to your users, which I think is great, once you gather those qualitative insights, if you feel like you're kind of maybe struggling a little bit to prioritize or get a kind of broad understanding of, how to prioritize these insights you've gathered, you can do something like it's from a framework called the outcome-driven innovation. And it's where you take your insights, you form them maybe in like a first-person statement. So, for example, if we take Spotify and you discover that users want to discover new music, you can just put that in a first-person statement. I want to discover new music. And you can survey your users in a sense and ask them to rate that statement in importance and satisfaction. So if you find out that this statement is high importance but low satisfaction, that's a good way to understand that maybe that's an opportunity for you to focus on moving forward. So it kind of goes either or as well, but kind of like I said, a mix of both is kind of the best method when it comes to user research.
Very good. And in terms of like conducting user interviews, like what are your kind of top tips for conducting those? And how do you make sure that you're capturing real insights and not just letting people say whatever they want? How do you kind of steer the conversation in a proper way?
Yeah, I think user interview facilitation is a very interesting skill that really just comes with a lot of practice and doing them over and over and over again. I think the best way to set yourself up with success is to just have a standard script of questions that you stick with throughout all the interviews. Of course, you're going to want to dig a little bit deeper, and you might go off track a little bit to dig into a point your participant made, but it's vital that you go back to that script and go back to the next question. The reason I say this is that when you come to your analysis stage and you've done, let's say 5 interviews, it makes it a lot easier to analyze that data if you can have a list of consistent questions, and each of the answers are related to that question back again. Obviously, big thing that people need to avoid with user interviews is bias or leaning questions. Try and keep your wording as neutral as possible. And if you really want to gather kind of some really good golden nuggets of information from your participants while facilitating, I think the key is just try not to interrupt them. Let those participants talk as much as possible. active listening, just sort of nodding, as they go along for them to acknowledge that you are listening. But really, people don't like awkward silences. People are happy enough to fill the gap. So even if the participant stops talking, don't jump into the next question straight away. Take a couple of seconds, let the awkward silence hit just for a second, and I'll guarantee they'll start talking again and give you an extra little bit of insight. When it comes to kind of avoid getting quality insights in the sense of you really don't end up at the end of your research with a shopping list of features that you have no understanding of really what to focus on or what to prioritize. I'd recommend trying to get your participants to speak up about their past experiences and use cases. Try and avoid talking too much about the future or, would they do this, would they do that? Because that's kind of really all hearsay. You really want to get an understanding of their past experiences because that is more leading towards the truth. There's no guarantee anything your participant says in regards to the future is something they will actually do when you do implement and move forward with your product.
That's great. And would it be very similar for usability testing in a way how you approach it, right?
Yeah, I think usability testing is very similar. I think when creating your usability test script, I think really when you're forming the task for usability tests, really try and consider how often you're interrupting the participant from the flow that you are testing. If you can imagine a real life scenario, you're not going to be there when this user is interacting with that flow. You're not going to be interrupting them in that. So with a usability test, you really want to create the most natural experience possible or the most real experience possible that they will have when interacting with that interacting with that prototype. So if you can, you should introduce your usability task, and hopefully the participant will be able to navigate through that user flow without you interrupting them too much. Sometimes that's impossible, that's okay, but I would just try and keep it as natural as possible. They should almost forget that you're there when engaging and completing that task in a way. So it kind of comes in similar in that sense, that you just sort of let the participant naturally engage with the prototype without you kind of leading in or jumping in too much about that.
One of the...
sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jane.
I was just going to say, Sean, one of the interesting things that I find is really helpful in our organization when you're forming those like scripts and questionnaires for both your user interview and user test, it's really helpful as well to kind of engage with your team and other areas of the business, because a lot of times we'll create a design or we'll be interested in a particular area, and by like speaking to research and raising, we actually would love to investigate this part of our design or this part. I don't know what you're experiencing with that or if you have any thoughts, but from a design perspective, we really love to engage with research even before any of those activities have taken place. And as well with stakeholders, it does help them feel bought in. So I think that engagement as well in creating those documents is super important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When you go in and join a product design team in an organization, and you might sit within a product team, user research is first of all, there's research going on all over business everywhere. Design teams doing their own research, the research team does research, the product team's doing research. So when it comes to presenting your insights and presenting your design recommendations to your stakeholders, there's no if there's no kind of buy-in from them, or there's no relationship set at that point in time where it's time, there's no real reason for them to believe you or take your advice or take your suggestions. So the best way to do is, like Jane said, collaborate with your stakeholders, your design team, your research team early on in the process. Align on the tasks, align on the objectives, get them bought in and engaged in the project, and it helps massively for the value that you add later on when you come back with those insights. They have an understanding where they come from, they are bought into that initiative, and it will just help you a lot when it comes to presenting those design decisions later on.
And I think as well, they'll come with their assumptions, and it's great to just get them tested out of the way early, so that it doesn't kind of come in later on down the line when it's a bit more problematic. They'll come with these ideas, and it's really great to get them tested early.
Yeah. Very
good. One of the things that we we got us advice, Jane, if you remember working in AIB a while ago, is every time when we tested something, like we used to kind of lie that we didn't design this, and that kind of resulted in us getting a better, kind of more honest feedback, because sometimes like people are feeling kind of obligated, you know, to give you a good feedback because they think you designed it. I don't know your experience, Sean and Jane.
Yeah, absolutely. Before every session, I would inform, and you can lie, it's fine. Inform them that you are not the designer or the owner of this platform or this product, and you wish them to be as honest as you wish. And it does ease them a little bit, and you do get more honest feedback. Yeah, 100% there. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think everyone does it in a way.
Great. You did speak about the surveys and, you know, when was the best time to use them, but are there any tips that you can give us for surveys, when to get the best results, and what are some kind of common mistakes that reduce the quality of the insights?
Yeah, I think I think surveys are one of the most powerful methodologies you can do in UX design. I think they're also probably not as respected as they should be when people create them. I think people see them as a very quick solution when it comes to doing research, while they actually can be quite a complicated methodology to get right. Some kind of obvious things is you really don't want your survey to be too long. I would always say maximum 10 questions, and even that is probably too much. You really, when it comes to creating a survey, you have to consider the cognitive load of a participant or a user completing that survey. The last thing you want is somebody dropping off of your survey halfway through because they've got bored or they think it's just too much effort to complete, and you lose those valuable insights, and most likely they're not coming back. So try and keep it as short as possible. Really consider how vital the questions are that you're answering. I think another key mistake is people try and answer questions through a survey that aren't suitable for a survey. So if you have a research question and you're going to run a survey methodology, consider, you know, how deep of an insight or deep of information do you need from your participants to really answer that question. It might be if it's not suitable for the survey, it's more suitable for something like a user interview, I'd recommend you put it to the side and look to try and answer it in a different format. You're not going to get the value or the insight that you really want, and in the end, then it's just a waste of a question when you do have limited space on that survey. People do utilize open text boxes in surveys, and people don't like typing, so you're not going to get massive insight from that. And even then, I would maximum have one open text box throughout your survey, and usually you put that at the end where it's just more of kind of an open. Do you have any additional feedback that you want to share, just to get you some additional value? But you shouldn't be banking the success of your survey on an open text box. Other small things, like I said, you want to keep people interested, so don't be using the same question type over and over again. I don't know if you've ever done a survey and it's just scale question after scale question. You're ticking the box. Gets very mundane, very boring very quickly. So if you can, try and mix it up, reorder your questions to try and make sense of that. And then I guess another big mistake people do is when measuring experience through a survey. So this is just going back to usability testing a little bit. But if you are looking to kind of get a sense of a user's experience completing your prototype, and you have a scale survey question at the end, maybe 1 to 7, very good, very bad. A lot of mistake people do is they wait too long to get the participant to answer that question. I recommend that you get them to complete that survey scale question as soon as they've completed the prototype. Don't ask them any other questions. Don't dig into any deeper. Get it to them while the experience is fresh in their minds. The amount of times I've received, emails 10 or 15 minutes after completing some kind of process online, and they ask me how my experience was. Who knows what could happen in those 10 minutes to kind of ruin my mood or lead me to forget about what happened. And then you just get misleading insights and misleading information. So if you are measuring experience and your usability test, do it as soon as you complete the prototype, and then you can dig into whatever else you want to do at that point.
Very good. I agree with you, Sean. Like, I think it's very, very difficult to also create like a really good survey. I'm not sure about like your approach on, because sometimes reviewing some, even mentees or like anyone else's surveys, I feel that sometimes they're gathering information that it's not even useful later, but just like because they feel like, okay, I should be asking, I don't know, like demographics, an example that sometimes is important, but sometimes it doesn't really make any difference. So like, is it okay to have like, some sort of a list, like, your objectives, what you want to get from that survey that will help you guide, like, the questions
Yeah.
that yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Like, I think a big thing in, a big aspect of doing user research is ensuring that you're researching the right thing. So you can go online and there's so many different resources online to help you get a better understanding of how to run research. But you can choose your methodologies and learn about the methodologies. But if you're not researching the right questions, the research is invaluable and it's not adding it in. So yeah, really create your list of questions and then really consider what is vital for your objective. And if it's not vital, it can be deprioritized and left to the side.
Very good. Oh, that's great. And then in terms of the kind of competitor analysis, is this something that you normally kind of do in your discovery stage? And, how much weight do you actually give it to compare the rest of your kind of research findings?
Yeah, like competitor analysis is extremely valuable. It's something that we kind of just do in my current role, like on kind of like an ongoing basis, and kind of sort of just kind of keeping the pulse on our competitors, really, then really kind of digging in and looking for it as inspiration. Like I think it's important to remember that your discovery phase is about learning about the goals of your users, the problems that's trying to solve, and kind of looking for opportunities through your users. And you can look at your competitors and they could have released, a shiny new feature, but you've no understanding of what problem they're really trying to solve there. And to be honest, there's no, you're not even sure if that feature is actually currently being successful for that competitor. So I think it's important to have the pulse of your competitors, be aware of what's going on in the industries that you're working in. But when it comes to the discovery phase, I wouldn't let it influence too much your innovation too heavily. I think you need to focus on the problem on hand and focus on the problem that you've identified through your user at this point. Of course, later down the design process, if you're starting to form your solutions and you kind of see that some of your competitors have maybe have something similar, yeah, dig in a little bit deeper. Maybe you can find opportunities to improve on that they're not currently doing. But in the discovery phase, I would try and focus a lot on the problem at hand or understanding the problem more than focusing too much on your competitor solutions.
Very good.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Seán. And as well, like, if you like, what I wouldn't potentially support in the discovery phase is even just a learning opportunity for you to kind of gauge what's out there and what the landscape of that solution looks like. Because if you're entering into this kind of new project and you're not familiar with how it works or what you're even trying to solve, like just actually understanding what's out there can help fill in those gaps. But absolutely, I would caveat that with, you don't know if it's working, you don't know why they've done it this way, and you don't know if it is solving the problem. But it is great. It is good for like that UI inspiration, like when you're in your design phase and you are kind of fleshing out your solutions. I've kind of found that stakeholders are really interested to know what's out there. And it is something that they'll ask kind of during those stakeholder playbacks or those workshops. And I think it's important to note like that you explain that you've kind of looked at it, but again, just setting the context that it's not actually something to be weighted too heavily on, because you're focusing on the problem, you're focusing on your quantum, your qual research, and it's kind of purely for inspiration, I would say. So yeah, I totally agree with Seán.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys. My next question is around like having your kind of research findings when it happens that they're like either conflicting or there might be unclear, or like, there's some things that you found out through surveys, but then it's not this, like, what are your experience with that and how do you handle these situations?
Yeah, like it does happen sometimes where like if you're in your discovery phase, you'd really just still generally haven't got a broad or kind of a good understanding of the problem at hand or the target persona that you're looking at. In a lot of cases, you just kind of keep going. Eventually you get a good understanding, but unfortunately timelines don't allow for that sometimes. But like I said before, research is being done all across the organizations that you work in. And everybody's doing research in some format. And I think at that point, it's incredibly vital and important and helpful to just start collaborating and asking people internally what's going on. Speak to obviously kind of maybe the product managers that you're working in your organization, the data analysts, who have the sales team been speaking to lately, what have they learned, customer service, any customer facing teams are all gathering these insights and help you kind of get this understanding of your users in that discovery phase. And you can also consult any past research or work. Does that help you kind of get any broader understanding? But I think collaboration can really help in any confusion, solving any confusion in a lot of cases. I think when it comes to later down the stage, if you're kind of prototyping and facilitating your usability testing, I think obviously if you're doing maybe A/B testings between two different variants and you find neither are working, obviously I think that just means you have to go back to the drawing board a little bit on that case. But at the same time, if you have two variants and they're both scoring quite highly success metrics, and you can't really see any difference in the time on task or whatever kind of metrics you're tracking with those A/B testing, I think that's an opportunity just for you as use your expertise a little bit as a designer to make that decision moving forward into that process.
Very good. Let's say now you're finished with your research and everything, and do you have some tips or kind of any advice? What is the best way to synthesize that research into, say, like, I don't know, your teams, or like, later when you kind of, synthesize it into personas or any sort of journey map without kind of getting lost in too much data?
Yeah, I think large amounts of qualitative data is always going to be quite difficult to manage. I think key, like I kind of said with the user interview script, when it comes to your qualitative metas, if you are consistent in how you collect the data, it makes it a lot easier to map it down the line. When it comes to synthesizing the research at a starting point, you can't go wrong with affinity mapping. The affinity mapping is basically, I'd recommend you kind of take a virtual whiteboard like FigJam or Miro, and using those post-its, just kind of map participants horizontally, and your questions vertically, and map out all those insights and just have them right in front of you. From there, you can kind of easily move them around, group them in what's similar sentiment or what has similar kind of themes and understandings at that point, and you can group them. Once you have those groupings, they're simply your themes, and you can title them all you want, but at least you kind of have that grouping that helps you out. I think at the point of when you've grouped and you have these small clusters of insights or data and feedback points, there is an opportunity there if you want to bring kind of something like generative AI into the play here. I think it'll help you kind of summarize those insights into kind of group into teams or insights that you can kind of bring forward into your recommendations. But I think there's no really easy way to kind of synthesize large qualitative. I think the structure, just to remember, is you have your data points, which are facts, group them into clusters, which is your themes, summarize those themes into your insights, and then understand how those insights impact your product, and they will be formed into your recommendations. And that probably wasn't the best way to clarify it. I probably need to whip out an affinity map myself and really show you, but I hope that kind of has some clarity to it.
I'm sure everyone knows.
Yeah.
So no worries. You did mention, oh, sorry, Jane, did you want to ask?
I was just going to ask Seán, when it comes to recommendations, how kind of prescriptive are you with those recommendations, or is that an opportunity to bring in UX design and work together, or are they very high level and it's up to design to kind of interpret the solution side of it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I as a UX researcher would be hesitant on making any design recommendations without having a discussion with the lead designer of that stage. I think recommendations that I would make would be more focusing on kind of the issue at hand more than the solution to that issue. So I'd give so all my recommendations would give the context of where the issue is, the impact that issue is currently having on the platform, and then a recommendation maybe of how we can move forward with that. But when it comes to the solution itself, I would obviously consult the designers. If the designer has the time for us to work on that sort of some kind of quick mock-up on that solution, it obviously increases the impact moving forward with that client or that stakeholder.
Right.
Very good. Oh yeah, you mentioned some AI tools, Sean. Like what would you recommend when it comes to kind of synthesizing the data? Or are there any other kind of AI tools that you're using for adding points?
Yeah, we haven't adopted any kind of fully, new AI tools into our workflows, bar the kind of the AI features that have been growing into our current tools. So, things like the transcription tools on the AI summary tools and transcription tools on Zoom are massively helpful when it comes to note taking in sessions. When it comes to creating kind of scripts and research plans, things like obviously ChatGPT and Copilot, once you get your kind of bullet points down and a general understanding of your plan, they'll help you flush it out into kind of a wider plan, or a bit more kind of broader, something that you can share out. So they're massively helpful across stage. I think the only part that I'd be hesitant in adopting AI too much into, I wouldn't get AI to analyze your data too early on in your analysis. AI is very commonly kind of making up a lot of false information, and I think it loses a lot of context that you have personally as your designer, as the researcher. So I'd always recommend that you do map out your data yourself. You do create your themes yourself. And only then, as you get later on into your analysis, you can maybe bring AI a little bit in to help you kind of formalize those summaries or formalize those recommendations. But just always remember that you are the expert. The AI tool is not the expert, and that you should be hesitant and review everything that you do with AI tools in that case. Another kind of things we use in AI in currently, we did a lot of investigation in creating AI agents as users. So we took some of the personas that we've created in Workhuman, and our kind of goal was to try and get an understanding of how could we create an AI agent to represent this persona. And I think we kind of found that as a repository, the agent worked quite well. So we could use the agent to sort of ask the questions and can spit back out the kind of research insights that we had. But one thing we did not find, that it's not useful for facilitating research itself. And we found that it's very agreeable, and it's happy to kind of, you lead it into bias questioning, it will kind of cause issues in that kind of sense. So there are ways to adopt AI into your processes, but it's not fully there yet.
Yeah, it can't really replace real users. I think I heard a similar story with that AI tool, synthetic users, where they used it to test, instead of testing with people. And as you're saying, like, it was very agreeable, like, it wasn't really finding any. Yeah. Okay. That's great. And in terms of the kind of design decisions, now, Jane, if you want to go first, like the insights that are gathered from kind of research team or yourself as a researcher, how do they influence your design decisions? How do you approach that?
I think that the insights, first of all, like, once, as Seán has mentioned, like, they're kind of delivered in a succinct way. If you have your persona, your journey maps, you have them to reference. It becomes quite easy to have those decisions because you have these documents to kind of reference and back you up. A lot of the time, decisions can kind of be, I suppose, they can kind of be surpassed by like stakeholder requests, and they can kind of just get lost in the mess. So I think having those documents like at hand to supplement those decisions. I'd also say just having, and I mean, I know a lot of people probably be both research and design, but having research there and part of those conversations, that's why it's so important, because they're the experts in the user research. So I would always, once you have that really well documented research handover, you should kind of be able to rationalize every decision that you've made with the documents. But if there's ever conversations happening about making design decisions or changing something, research absolutely have to be in the room, because it can get lost in kind of, especially towards the end when you're pushing for delivery, things can get compromised, and you just want to make sure that the integrity of the solution is maintained. So yeah, I would say keeping research in the room for those conversations is really important, but also having those artifacts kind of with you all the time is really helpful.
That's a really good point. And yeah, we noticed that in also like, and in mentees work and also at work, that sometimes you just kind of forget about your research findings later in the flow, but then like it's always good, as Jane said, to kind of look back and just make sure that you're taking the right direction. What was one other thing I wanted to ask you on this one? Yeah, sorry, my brain just stopped. Seán, do you have something to add here before I move on?
No, I completely agree with Jane. I think sticking with a defined research process through that phase is very vital to, like Jane said, if you come to a stakeholder and they begin asking questions or digging into the why or the reasoning behind your decisions and the direction you took, sticking with a defined process fills you with confidence to make sure that you're able to kind of clarify any of those points. I think I said it before, but I think just keeping your stakeholders engaged throughout the research process is especially useful for creating that value and then helping you kind of making your design decisions more impactful later on. Small things that I do would be if I kind of ran a usability test or a user interview, and there was a section of that set those sessions that I knew that my stakeholders would be really keen to understand, or that I felt like it summarizes a lot of the learnings that we've learned throughout those sessions. It's just to clip out the audio clip or the video clip, send it into your stakeholders Slack channel or your Teams channel, and get them to engage with it. Ask a question that they will need to answer, whether it's their opinion or their thoughts on the point, and kind of get that discussion going early on with those stakeholders. And it just builds in the buy-in, adds value to them and helps them get an understanding of where those decisions are when it comes to later down in the design process.
I actually did a workshop before in my previous job, and I was dealing with group stakeholders who were really solutionizing before. Like we'd only done, I think, one round of user testing on very low fidelity, so we were really in the early stages. And I one exercise I found really helpful with them was to show them the design and get them to ask them what did they think the users were actually going to, how it was going to test for users. And then afterwards to play them the clip. And it's not something that's essential to a process. It was more a solution to a problematic group of stakeholders, but it was really great at kind of confronting their assumptions. So there's a lot of different ways I think to manage stakeholders when they start to interrupt that kind of research process that Seán was describing.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
When it comes to deciding what you want to work on, what is the best way to prioritize, say, the likes of issues? Is it just kind of simple method of okay, this was the thing that most people were complaining about, that you found in your findings, or what are the kind of other ways or kind of best ways to decide actually what you want to work on as a designer, and also maybe from research side?
I actually have found, so there, and Seán might be able to answer this one, but it does help when you kind of rank the severity of some of the issues that are surfaced during the user test, and then you can kind of prioritize them based on urgency or based on severity, usability severity. Another thing you can do that kind of maybe steps a little bit outside of the user side of things is to do a prioritization matrix of the issues that are surfaced, and I think you can map that against business objectives or technical feasibility. And keeping in mind the scope of the project, you might surface a major issue, but realize this is actually way outside the scope because the user asked for an AI chatbot or they want AI assistance, and you just have no scope to build that. So sometimes those prioritization matrix can actually help you decide which ones to focus on. But I do think focusing purely on a user and usability perspective, ranking them on severity, which I think maybe Seán will be able to better kind of add detail to, but that I think helps a designer anyway prioritize which issues to focus on first, especially in a really rich kind of data set.
Great.
I completely agree. I think there is a bit of a balance when it comes to things like usability testing. When it comes to usability issues, you could run a usability testing with 5 users, and all 5 users have the same issue, but this one user identifies a problem that breaks the whole flow, and you as a designer needs to understand and be aware of that maybe the severity of that problem is above the other issues that were identified were 5 users. When it comes to mapping out this kind of the severity of an issue, I think, yeah, there's no kind of real scientific process, but just more, I would say more that if the user cannot continue the flow based on the issue identified, that's high severity. If it delays the issue, medium severity, or if they can continue with the flow, but it's just a minor kind of experience issue, a low. Priority matrix is one thing. I think one framework that I've most experienced when it comes to prioritizing kind of design decisions moving forward into implementation is the ICE framework. So basically, it's a collaboration framework that you would do with your researcher, your designer, your product manager, and engineering as well. And basically, ICE stands for impact, cost, and ease of use, I think. So you decide how impactful the implementation of this design would be. What's the cost of it to the business for implementing it, and how easy is it for engineering to really implement it. And based on those kind of those scores, kind of helps you get an understanding of how to build a roadmap moving forward with the designs.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And definitely, guys, like if you can include that as a part of your work, it will give an additional kind of weight to your case study, because you will also consider the business value, also engineering and everything. So great tip. Thank you both. So in terms of the kind of amount of findings, research findings that you have, how do you know that you have enough of the insights to actually start with the ideating phase?
And as a researcher, I'll be honest, my recommendation would be to keep researching until you stop learning anything new. And that could be after 5 tests or 5 interviews. It could be after 10 tests, 10 interviews. But at that point, I think there is no reason to stop researching and testing until you've really confirmed that there's nothing else to learn from the project that you're running. And if most of the time, I'd say that the timeline of the project will make that decision for you. You'll just run out of time based on for your research, and you'll be kind of forced into sort of understanding and prioritizing those insights that you have into the next phase, your design process. But if it comes to kind of just making a decision yourself as the designer and what to, once you have a clear user problem to focus on, I think that's a good opportunity for you to move into the next stage of your process. It's just important that you stick with that user problem, and you make sure that you're constantly going back and ensuring that you haven't gone off track and that you're focusing on that problem yourself. When you go into join a product design team, you could do the best, you do follow your research process perfectly, follow all the correct methodologies, answer all the research questions, or answer, speak to a lot of participants, go into your design process. But if you haven't solved the problem of the business or answered the goals of the business, it's all useless information really in the end. So make sure you stick to the goal of the project and the problem that you've identified. So yeah, once you've identified a clear user problem, I think it's a good opportunity for you to move into ideation, or if you've identified 2 or 3 usability issues, if you're at that phase, to start moving again. You can't solve all problems at once. So once you've identified a few key issues, you can move in.
Good.
Yeah, just to add to that, I totally agree. I think once you as a designer feel like you have are confident and you have a basic understanding of the problem, obviously covering off the 5 W's, like who, what, when, where, why, that's very basic stuff, but also making sure that you have them correctly briefed in by the business as well, because like Seán was saying, you have to understand the business objectives, you have to understand the value, you have to understand why you're doing this. And that might come in the form of a brief, or it might be an exercise that you have to go off and do yourself. You might have to go off and find out that information through a workshop or through an interview. I think once you have those kind of key items covered off, you can start with your ideating. But I would say that I feel like every designer, when they start designing, will always feel a level of uncertainty about whether or not they have enough information. And I think you'll learn about the gaps through your design, and just capturing those gaps and then feeding those into your next round of user testing. So you're never going to know 100% about your problem before you get started, but just getting comfortable with that and identifying those gaps to feed it into the next round of research, I think is probably the most helpful thing.
That's a really good point, Jane. And I think it's actually, in a design process, you're encouraged to go back and just constantly go back and iterate and just kind of confirm whatever the kind of problem solution is like
Mhm.
it's not wrong to make a mistake and go back. Like it's the way that you learn, and this like if it happens, it's definitely desirable rather than something that you should be hiding. Yeah. Those were all of my questions, actually. Like the last question that I have on my list is if you had a piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you were starting your kind of user research or early stage design work, that you can give to the guys here.
I think all successful projects start off with a clear and concise plan, and I think you shouldn't rush into any research decisions or design decisions until you're fully confident and aligned on what you want to do and what you want to focus on moving forward into that project. It just allows you to stay focused, allows you to keep you on track, and I think it's just a best practice that you will take into your design for the rest of your design career. And I think that'll be the best piece of information starting off.
Thanks, Seán.
I would just say, like, get really comfortable with the fact that you're not going to know everything, because like that was the hardest thing for me. Like I think you're put in a position where you're a researcher, you're a designer, people will ask you questions and you feel as though you have to have all the answers, but you don't. And like I think the best thing you can do is get comfortable saying, I don't know, but you're just open to learning and you're learning how to do that project. We had a project there in VHI, we were doing information architecture, and we were all in the same boat of just learning what that meant, how to go about the research process, what that involves, because learning is just so important. So I would just get really comfortable with kind of not being aware that you're not going to know everything in the beginning, but learning as you go along.
Very good. That's all from my list. Thank you so much, Seán and Jane. Guys, I'm going to open the floor to you if you have any questions, and also whoever can switch on their cameras if you want to ask a question. Anything else that you want to expand on?
I had a question just about the synthetic users. I actually hadn't come across them before, but when would you guys kind of use them? Like, is it more so after you've done usability testing and you would put the persona in and it would help validate some of the findings based on what it's coming back with, or in what cases, would you use it?
It's a good question. It was very kind of early, kind of just investigation work, seeing how we could adopt AI into our process. I think the idea would be that it would be used more in a discovery sense, that if we can create a strong enough persona and implement, AI into that persona, it could be used to kind of help us ideate and gather more information. We found that wasn't the case. It's more suitable just to be kind of a repository of information. We're not learning anything new from it. We also found kind of other issues with it. So, for example, if I asked if I had my AI agent and I asked it a question and it gave me this answer and gave me its kind of opinions and thoughts on a certain aspect based on this persona, when I took that answer, put into ChatGPT and asked it to rewrite that answer in the completely opposite sentiment, so disagree completely with what the persona stated, I then took that answer, gave it back to the AI agent and asked the AI agent what's the opinion out of it, and it just wouldn't disagree with the opinion. No matter how much we kind of gave it, it would still back up itself. It still kind of reiterate its own points, but it would not disagree even with the complete opposite sentiment answer to what it originally put. And my concerns with that was that it wasn't the agent's fault. My concerns would be on the human side of things. So I built this AI agent and allowed my stakeholders and my designers and the product team to engage with this. It'd be so easy for someone who has maybe a lot of strong assumptions or leaning bias to go in, ask the agent their thoughts on their assumption, and the agent will just agree with them. Mm-hmm. And then we're going down a whole bad, route of ideation and innovation in that case. So it was very early on. I think we were thinking more about discovery. I don't know how we would do a usability test at the moment anyway, but who knows where it'll go in the next few years.
Not surprised.
Well, thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Florence. Do you want to say something?
No, Brill, like thanks for giving me that insight. Yeah, I just hadn't heard of it. And thank you both. Yeah, I found it really insightful, all the questions and answers.
Thanks, Florence.
Yeah, I don't know. When you were saying that, Sean, I was actually thinking like every time when you ask ChatGPT something, it always says, "Oh, great idea."
Yeah, they're very agreeable.
Yeah. Anyone else, guys? Any questions related to research and early design stage? I'm not sure what stage are you now. Have you started already with either interviews or surveys or usability testing, anything?
I started with some surveys and putting out some interviews soon.
Very good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think with your first UX design project, I think mixing quantitative and qualitative methods to start off, just to get practice in both. So surveys, and do some interviews, and just start getting practice and building skills in those methods, which will do you well moving into your careers.
Very good. Alessia is saying there's actually a setting in ChatGPT for making it less agreeable and true to facts. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just didn't want to jump in, guys. This is your panel, but yes, there is a setting. You can go there and you can essentially set up your AI. You can actually write text there, and you can ask ChatGPT to this prompt for you, where you can actually say you can force the AI to be less agreeable and state that he can negate your idea and so on. So that could be really helpful to investigate, since Sean, you found this huge issue with that being agreeable. If you want, you can try it out and see how it works.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. Unfortunately, with our experiment, we were kind of limited. We have to use Copilot due to security of the data. So yeah, ChatGPT, I think, is a much more powerful tool. Or maybe I'm not 100% sure, but in my opinion, it feels like a more powerful tool than Copilot at the moment. So yeah, we were a little bit limited in our experiments, definitely. And there are sites like synthetic, I think they're called Synthetic Humans, Valentina, that you mentioned, that they base their synthetic users. What they do is you input, maybe create your study, and then select 5 synthetic users. I think what they do is they send out the questions to 5 different LLMs, so ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and they come back and synthesize that one answer to help also remove the bias across all those different LLMs, which also helps the validity of it. So there are ways of kind of getting around it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to use Synthetic Humans. I think they quoted us €5,000 for a 4-day trial or something like that. So that's why we went about and tried to do our own experiment on that.
It's crazy price.
Yeah.
One thing that, Florence, you may want to try, and I haven't tried it myself, okay, so I'm just putting out the idea for synthetic users, right? Since, as Sean was saying, like using synthetic users for research, so for discovery, can really lead you out of the way, out of the right path, right? You could try to use them, I was suggested that, okay, to not really look for truth, let's say, but you can try to use it as a way of redefining your script for the usability test, right? So if you want to use it, you go to your synthetic user and you put on how would you reply to this question, or you can ask is there any question that is missing, too biased, too leading, and so on. So essentially you can see how the synthetic user would reply to your question there, and use that to improve your plan before you bring it to an actual user, especially if you consider that if the persona that you're using is really based on real data, right? So it's not like something that it's not a product persona, it's an actual persona that you have created out of your research. It can help. I imagine it can help you figure out or try to foresee how people would react to the question, and so helping you select the right one and the most interesting one, or so I'm told. Okay, I haven't tried it, so just putting some ideas there.
Great advice, yeah. Thanks, Alessia. Emma, did you want to ask a question?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you both. It was like really interesting to hear you and to listen to all your points. And hi, Jane. It's really good to see you again. Hi. Hi, how you been? Hi, how you been?
Good, how are you?
Good, really nice. Good. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
I know, it's been 20 years since our graduation.
It's true,
Yeah.
true.
Time flies.
Nice. No, thank you anyway. It was really good, really interesting, everything.
That's great. Thanks so much. I'm happy to hear you enjoyed it. And such a small UX world. I mean, in Dublin. Mark, hi.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi Valentina, thank you so much, guys. I would love to ask you a little bit about, you were talking about prioritization, and Jane, you mentioned the prioritization matrix, and Seán, you mentioned the ICE framework. I thought that was really interesting. Could you tell me a little bit about, like, you hear about difficulties with buy-in on UX design teams and stuff. Could you tell me a little bit about, have you been in a situation where, like a real challenging situation where you were just, you know, you were generating insights and for whatever reason, the constraints, it just wasn't landing. Has that happened to you, and how would you navigate that?
Yeah, it can happen quite often across a lot of UX design teams. Obviously, when it comes to product development, there's always going to be a lot of strong opinions, and like I said, everyone's doing research, everyone has their own thoughts and their own insights. When it comes to sort of really, making sure that kind of your insights are the most impactful, your science is the most impactful. I know I keep going back to engagement, but that is really key. So I'll just say that first of all, if you can get your stakeholders even in the sessions, which would be even more ideal. What I love to do is, if there's a lot of strong kind of product managers or directors of products, invite them to all the research sessions that are relevant to those projects, and let them know that I will give you 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session. You can ask whatever questions you want. That immediately makes them feel a part of it, and again, it's going to buy in down the road. One thing that I think people kind of get wrong in UX design is underestimating who their stakeholders are. So one great way to get buy-in across is just to share the research out beyond the product team. Get the engineering team involved, get people on your side for those decisions beyond just the kind of key stakeholders that filter in within product. Engineering, CSMs, customer success. There's no reason why 95% of user research can't be shared out company-wide. And by getting that broad buy-in across the organization, just makes your voice stronger, I guess, when it comes to those kind of product meetings down the line.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think as well, like ultimately it comes down to buy-in. There are other factors involved as well, like the maturity of your organization. If you're a relatively immature UX organization, you're going to have less buy-in. But as you kind of grow and your UX team grows and the influence of UX grows, you will have more recognition, more buy-in. So there's kind of an organizational piece. What I will say as well is sometimes it can be a bit political, where like you kind of have to pick your battles. Small wins can sometimes feel really significant to stakeholders, and they can feel very involved in the process, particularly from the design perspective. Stakeholders love anything visual. So anytime you have like any major iteration, we would do playback with them. We might do a workshop where we ask them for their feedback, and sometimes we'll bring that feedback into test. Sometimes it tests well, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we are designing specifically for a business goal that might not necessarily be a need for a user. Now, I would always weight the design towards like more user-oriented research, but in a recent project we introduced a section on our website that was purely dedicated to kind of strategic organizational content, and it was all about content that the business really wanted to leverage. And as long as that didn't compromise any of the main like user journeys or user tasks, it really actually struck gold with stakeholders, and it made them kind of appreciate us on another level. So we were kind of strategically able to introduce users to another section of the website that business wanted us to. So I think you kind of have to, it is a balancing act. You obviously always have to be most conscious of your main user, but bringing the business in those little ways really makes them feel involved and bought in. And I think doing that bit by bit every project, you'll win them over.
And I think I'll just also add, just because it's also very important that people like that sort of just general skills that you find in any field of work. So building relationships early, you know, with your stakeholders is key. You know, just making personal relations with them, as well, and also then of course understanding what matters to them when coming with your research deliverables. So you know if they're very quantitative heavy, you know, stakeholders lead in without that kind of data information. If you know they'll respond well to video clips or audio clips, lead into that as well. So just building personal relationships, like anything, is obviously very important as well when it comes to this. Because like Jane said, it can get quite political. So you need friends. You know,
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys.
That's a very good advice. That was brilliant, guys. Thank you so much. And audience, thank you so much for being so engaged. That was great. And I'm hoping that you got the most of this, the best of this session. So we have recording. There will also be article and Gemini notes from this call. So I'm going to post everything on our Slack channel. Once again, Seán, Jane, thank you so much. That was really brilliant. I also learned a few new things. So thanks a mil. And yeah, we're going to let you have your dinner now.
thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.